Good morning, everyone. This is Scott Jones at Linden Elementary School. And this is my EDL 851 Module 8 presentation over legal aspects of teacher evaluations. Just to start off, some things that we already know about evaluations. It's a process the schools use to review and rate teacher performance and effectiveness in the classroom. And the goal of any good evaluation should be improved teaching and learning in the classroom setting. I learned a lot throughout the course of this module, read a lot of paperwork, and it's normally governed by state laws. It's generally designed at the district and local level and carried out there. So each evaluation system has varying details and characteristics, and each district and school board has different requirements based on their teachers. Traditionally, these evaluations have basically been through classroom observations, through either an administrator, a superintendent, some sort of delegate that goes through and evaluates personnel. And in recent years, in the last 10 to 12 years, it's turned to a more comprehensive evaluation where we focus on what teachers do in the classroom, their classroom management skills, their preparation, what they contribute to the schools, and then, realistically, what the students are learning. About 10 or 12 years ago, we started evaluation reform, and this can be attested and attributed to the following factors. The first one was new research on teacher quality, an interest in boosting teacher effectiveness, the efforts by advocacy groups to revamp state laws, and then therefore there was pressure from advocacy groups to dismiss poorly performing teachers. It's really kind of unclear whether or not these reforms have led to teachers receiving productive feedback, and most of the new data shows that a majority of teachers still score about the same on current test scores as they did on previous observation scores. Okay, why the emphasis on evaluations? The Stanford University economist Eric Hanchik estimated that a top performing teacher helped students gain more than a grade's worth of learning, while poor performing teachers did not meet grade level. This went two ways. Some felt that these evaluation systems were meant to help teachers, to provide positive feedback, to provide constructive criticism. That way they could master the art of teaching, and that way they could become more effective. And then you have the other side of things where some policymakers believed that evaluation systems should be based on just culling the weak. So discarding the teachers that aren't performing at grade level or aren't doing their job to a satisfactory level. In 2009, we began a federal initiative called the Race to the Top competition, where the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, the U.S. Department of Education, released $4.3 billion to schools that were offering grants to make certain policy changes. Among these prescribed changes was a requirement to develop and implement new teacher evaluation systems. They had to have 3 levels of performance, and they had to take student achievement into account. By 2013, 28 states had then required teacher evaluations, and 41 states required consideration of student achievement data. This was a drastic increase in 4 years. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have also spent more than $700 million on teacher quality initiatives throughout the country. How do these new evaluation systems work? The new evaluation systems are far more complex than the previously used rubrics or checklists. So they rely heavily on periodic observations, where we use comprehensive data as far as student achievement, test scores, classroom management skills, and basically we go through what a good teacher looks like. All right. The more sophisticated approaches use a statistical technique called the value-added model. The VAM attempts to filter out sources of bias, and they need to arrive at an estimate of how much each teacher contributed to student learning. And you know as well as I do, this can be very difficult to know and understand. Watching classroom teachers has been tried and true for a number of years. I grew up in education systems. I grew up in an education household. And even though they weren't required by the state, the districts that we were involved in still had teacher evaluations. So I knew what the process looked like. I knew how it worked before I ever got into education. Seeing how the teacher handles the classroom, what type of atmosphere they bring to the kids, what type of learning objectives they place in front of them, how they prepare for class, and then on the other side, what type of role model they are and how do they handle their professional responsibilities. Okay, you not only have to be a great teacher, you also have to be a great role model for our students, and you have to be a great colleague as well. The advantages of teacher observations. With well-designed rubrics, you can kind of take the bias out of things. You get reliable and accurate results. And it also allows your administrators to know exactly what's going on in their school setting. In small town Kansas, I believe that is very, very important. It's very critical. It's very crucial. I understand how it won't be effective in a large school district, but in a 1A, 2A high school in Kansas, your principal and your superintendent need to be visible to the students. The disadvantages, again, it's a time commitment. So we're pulling these administrators out of meetings, we're pulling them out of delegating authority, and we're pulling them out of things out of their schedule to place themselves in the classroom and to take a little bit of time out of their day to go observe their teachers in action. Again, we talked about the bias of things. There's going to be bias in everything we do. So again, the evaluation is only as good as the evaluator wants to make it. The second option would be the value-added model. This is the more sophisticated approach. It goes through an algorithm, and they input all this data. At the end, you get a test score of what you believe your teacher effectiveness would be. The VAM takes the test scores of students from previous years, as well as information about their demographics, their background, and then we try to predict what their test scores should be. And to me, this is where the VAM model is lacking. It's based off of a prediction. The teacher's value-added estimate is calculated by finding the average between the differences between the actual and predicted scores. The advantage, it's pretty simple to implement, and you can change it based on your school and your setting. The administrators can adjust the algorithm however they wish. The disadvantage, we already talked about this, it can be incredibly inaccurate. This is the model that I believe our evaluation system is based off, would be the framework model. It's covered in 4 different domains, and each domain recovers essential responsibilities of being an effective teacher. So the first one would be planning and preparation. And then you have your observation and instruction, where we go through the classroom environment and the instructional phase. And then you have a post-evaluation phase where we cover how your lesson went, and then we cover your professional responsibilities, what type of colleague and what type of role model you're being. The advantages, the discussions have been found to be more focused. The reflection on instructional practices was increased, and it wasn't in a very confrontive matter. The feedback became more evidence-based rather than being very subjective. The last one I'm not very familiar with, the Marzano-focused teacher evaluation model. Again, this is based off different categories and different subjectives that are based off what an effective teacher looks like. These competencies are focused into 4 different groups: standards-based planning, standards-based instruction, conditions for learning, and professional responsibilities. They found that the teachers have grown professionally. They've learned how to engage their students, and the more focus was given to planning and creative learning goals than it was to standards-based learning or teaching to the test. Here at USD 421, we go along with the framework model. New teachers have 3 observations per year for the first 3 years. Tenured teachers have an annual observation, and that's a requirement throughout the district. I went ahead and included a link to our evaluation system. You feel free to go through that and look at that if you wish. You'll see that we go through, and the teacher fills out this lesson plan before the pre-evaluation meeting ever begins. So this is about 2 weeks prior to your actual evaluation. A week before that, we have a pre-observation meeting with the principal. You sit down with them, you discuss the unit goals and the goals that you hope to get out of your lesson. A week later, we go through our actual observation. The teacher comes in your classroom, sits through the lesson. Students learn. They go through their assignment, their activities. Students leave, and then you talk to the principal afterwards. You go back through the document. The principal writes their reflection on the issue. I write my reflection on the issue. And then we go into the post-observation meeting together. This was the part that I learned the most about. And I'm sorry for all the verbiage here. This came out of our teacher contracts and our teacher staff handbook. The principal and our KNEA rep had to go through, and we had to locate this. They've never had an employee that has not agreed with an evaluation here. And I thought that was fairly interesting for a school district that's been functioning for right at 100 years. In most cases, an employee is asked to sign the warning or evaluation, the document. So we go through this post-observation meeting. If I agree, I sign the document. The principal agrees. We all leave. We shake hands, and everything's good. But you can refuse to sign the document. and we follow the chain of command very strictly around here. So as I refuse to sign the document, the principal has the right to bring in a third party to make sure that I understand my rights. The third party signs the document, the principal signs the document. I'm allowed to write a reflection based on why I do not want to sign their document and why this evaluation process was not worthy. And then the third party, the unbiased party, signs the document that says I refuse to sign it. It goes into my personal file, and then we follow the chain of command. So we talk to the principal about it. We go through, we talk to the superintendent about it. If we feel like the issue has not been taken care of, we contact our KNEA reps and we go to the school board. So it's not a real complicated process, but there are a lot of steps involved. After going through and reading the first article about all the different litigation based around evaluations, I agree with Callie Harris, and there's been a lot of litigation out there that hasn't passed. And that kind of surprised me a little bit with all of the different checklists and all the different anomalies involved in all these lawsuits. You would have thought there would have been a higher percentage. Now, the one that struck me closest to home, being a PE teacher, was the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, against the New Mexico Public Education Department. And basically all this lawsuit was about was teachers that were being based on the VAM model, being evaluated based on the VAM model, and they were being evaluated on students that weren't in their homeroom classroom. So not being a core subject matter, which students would I be based and evaluated off of? And how do I personally have an impact on their learning or on their test scores in this instance? So this one's still in progress. In 2015, the state court judge denied the motion to dismiss, so it's still in progress, and they held a preliminary injunction. So again, the VAM model is an interesting idea. It's an interesting concept. I understand what they're trying to get out of it. I can also see the problems in not being incredibly accurate and ineffective. So there is my presentation over the legal characteristics of evaluations. I hope you learned something. I enjoyed going through all the paperwork, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future.